everyone, and welcome to tonight's interview with Dr. Trevor Berry. My name's Vanessa, and today we're diving into a topic that I believe is going to shape the future of both health and longevity. We're going to talk about brain health and how we can protect it as we age. When we often talk about aging, most people think of wrinkles, joints, or maybe even weight gain. But what's often overlooked is something called inflammaging, which is a form of chronic low-grade inflammation that not only accelerates aging throughout the body, but it also has a huge impact on the brain. And here's the thing, if we can protect the brain, we can protect everything else. So I'm so excited to be joined by someone who is at the very forefront of this conversation, Dr. Trevor Berry, who is a board-certified chiropractic neurologist, international lecturer, and published researcher who has spent nearly 3 decades helping people recover, repair, and optimize brain function. He combines advanced neurorehabilitation, functional medicine, and cutting-edge technologies like non-thermal high-energy laser to deliver real-world results. So in our conversation today, we're going to take a break down and we're going to break this down into plain language. So whether you're brand new to this field or you've been following the research for years, you should walk away understanding what inflammation is, how it's impacting your brain right now, and the difference between popular brain stimulation technologies like TMS and non-thermal lasers. Most importantly, you'll learn how this knowledge can be applied to keep your brain sharp, your mood stable, and your body healthy for years to come. So Dr. Trevor Berry, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today talking to the European audience.
It's always an honor and a pleasure to see you and the European team, and I love getting over the pond, virtually or in person. So it's great to be back over there. Looking forward to sharing the evening with you and your time. So
yeah, your morning, our evening. I think I first met you in San Diego maybe 3 years ago now. So we definitely need to get you over to the UK and Europe for some more lectures for everybody. So
I would love that.
For those who don't know you, can you share a little bit about your background and how you really came to specialize in brain health and functional neurology?
Yeah, so, my background was in sports and exercise physiology. And then as I went through chiropractic school, obviously there's a very big neurological underpinning to the chiropractic education, but there was also a lot of questions that I still had. There was a lot of antiquated explanations as to why, if you did an adjustment or some sort of activation, how that affected the brain, how that affected the central nervous system. So it just drove me to get, I want to know the science. I want to know the X's and O's. I want to know the pathways. I'm kind of one of those neuro geeks. And so then my whole practice is based around things like post-concussion, traumatic brain injury. Most of my patient base is Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And just as important is from a personal perspective. One of the things that when I get in front of any audience, one of my first things I point out is, statistically speaking, about half of the people in our attendance today are going to succumb to a neurodegenerative condition like Alzheimer's. So my number one objective anytime I get in front of the camera on stage is to protect your brains. What can you do to provide the best environment and the most healing capacity and whatnot? And so, one thing I'll mention as a personal note is my ex-wife and I, our 2 daughters, that side of the family has a severe genetic predilection for Alzheimer's. So one of my big goals is to protect the brains of my daughters, as well as my patient base, as well as mine. So I'm constantly on the lookout for what are the best, most research and efficacious ways to protect the brain. And that's really what drove me into that. And so it just kept spanning from there. And then obviously now I'm educating and doing other programs to help get the message out to more people worldwide.
Amazing. So we're going to really delve into inflammaging. That topic and concept is new to quite a lot of people. Can you explain what it is in simple terms and why it's such a big concern for our health as we age?
Well, a good analogy, well, for starters, when you look at the 15 leading causes of death in the United States, and it's very similar to Western Europe, inflammation is an underpinning to 14 of the 15 leading causes of death. So cardiovascular disease, cancer, like inflammation is a major underpinning on every stage of the aging and neurodegeneration process. So if you can tamp out, like most people, we understand their acute inflammation is good. You need inflammation in certain things, like to fight off viruses, to repair an injury and whatnot. But we're talking chronic inflammation. that smoldering fire that, you know, so I like to think of the brain as like this beautiful garden that you need light energy, you need minerals, good soil, that kind of stuff. Well, if your garden's on fire, it's not going to flourish and grow and thrive and whatnot. So one of the first things you have to do for brain health is put out chronic inflammation. And obviously that comes from many sources: diet, lifestyle, injuries, pathogens, things like that. So then you start to look at, well, what are the biggest things you can use to put out the fire? And that's one of the reasons why we love things like low-level laser therapy, because it's one of the best anti-inflammatory devices you have out there. So aging is your precursor for the, you know, when you look at some of the tie-in with free radicals and oxidative stress and the telomere shortening and the, you know, the mitochondrial demise and senescent cells when they stop producing and stop working. Inflammation is a major linchpin of that. So all roads come to inflammation. If you're not addressing chronic inflammation of the brain, you're not going to get good results with brain health and activity and longevity.
Okay, and how does chronic inflammation affect the brain specifically, and what kind of symptoms might people notice?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's like anything that the brain needs to do, whether it's make new pathways, new connections, mitochondrial output, you know, as far as the free radical, you know, antioxidant system, inflammation is an underpinning to that. And where most people would, like, some very common symptoms that you see, for example, in post-concussion is brain fog. You know, that's a very common one. How about certain headaches, or, you know, that they'll feel a certain headache type of symptomatology. A lot of our neuropsych stuff, depression, anxiety, OCD behavior, all that has, you know, inflammation is tied into all that. Pain obviously is a very low-hanging fruit answer to that. So a lot of the very common things that we deal with, but even like memory decline and cognition changes and loss of executive function and whatnot is, you know, when you start tamping out the fire, one of the things you'll hear all the time in my practice is like, I have this brain fog from my concussion, and I get the laser on the brain, and literally they say, you know, that's the most clarity of thought I've had since my head injury, or that's the best I've slept. You know, because when your brain and body's on fire, you're not sleeping, you're in fight or flight mode and things like that. So a lot of the common neurological symptoms are based on inflammation.
And what happens if you just leave those symptoms and you do absolutely nothing to address them?
Well, you're right in the crosshairs for neurodegeneration stuff like Alzheimer's and your dementias, your Parkinson's. Again, a lot of that stuff, and you know, just quality of life in general. When you think of brain optimization, like as long as we're on this, like, living, you want to live a vibrant life, right, of sound mind and body. And inflammation is one of the biggest things that'll wipe your legs out from underneath you on that. So if you don't tackle chronic inflammation, that's where, like, even say when I'm working with my athletes, like my NFL, NHL players and whatnot, you know, that you hear these terms like CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So when the brain has concussions and that brain is on fire, that's part of what keeps it chronic. Is I'll teach, like, you have all these supporting cells in the brain. They're called glial cells. It's just one of the supporting cells, and they're like the Bruce Banner of the brain. They're super smart scientists, and they're doing all kinds of things to help your primary neurons out. But if you get punched in the head, Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk. Now, again, you need the Hulk initially, but if you've watched the Avenger movies, what happens if the Hulk stays the Hulk? He's destroying the city, the streets, the cars are getting flipped, all that stuff. And so Hulk smash, well, you need to turn the Hulk back to Bruce Banner. And chronic brain inflammation is tied into that. It's called M1, M2 glial resolution. That's those macrophages, those Hulk cells need to be turned back into the super sharp scientists. Otherwise, your brain's actually being atrophied, it's being destroyed, and you get loss of neurons and things of that nature.
Okay, so it's obviously really important to address these things. And one of the tools that I know that you've been using for a long period of time is non-thermal laser. When people think laser, they often think, oh, this is going to be hot, it's going to be painful, it's going to be uncomfortable. You can't possibly put a laser on the brain. So how is, let's say, non-thermal laser, in particular the Erchonia devices, so different? And why is that like one of your go-to devices that you use in clinic?
Oh, this is, well, I mean, if you had to take one here, let me just give you an example. You know, most of our audience is using AI now, right? And I have all the upgraded bells and whistles, consensus, chat 5.0, like everything you can upgrade for AI. One of the things I put in the other day, I said in there, give me one monotherapy and you have any choice of any research, any clinical, any health related thing. You can do medication, you can do electrical stim, magnetic stim, nutrition, you name it, surgery, peptides, stem cell. I said, give me the top 3 things just by themselves. What are the top 3 things to protect and repair the brain and even reverse neurodegeneration like Alzheimer's? Guess what number 1 was? Exercise, movement. Exercise was number 1. Number 2, photobiomodulation, low-level laser therapy. That was number 2. And so, and I've crossed this, like some of my other colleagues, I had them do the same thing just to make sure it wasn't an algorithm thing or something. And it said the same thing on theirs too. So when you want to check off, if you think of optimal brain function, one of the first things that you want to do is promote neurogenesis, new neurons. That's the holy grail of brain health, and new mitochondria. Well, putting laser on the brain, like literally taking a device like this and putting it on your brain, has been shown to promote new neurons in areas like the hippocampus in animal studies. That's your memory center, like where Alzheimer's and things like that starts. It promotes all of your antioxidant systems. So when you think of free radical damage, those free radicals are mopped up by things like glutathione and superoxide dismutase and getting laser on the brain is one of the best ways to do your antioxidant systems. How about mitochondrial output and mitochondria? So the energy that your brain needs, you think of the amount of energy, like over 20% of your oxidative capacity is in your brain. And so getting this device on your head actually promotes mitochondrial output, so your energy production, and mitochondrial biogenesis, so new mitochondria are done. All of your growth factors for brain, like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, to make new neurons, new connections by getting this device on the head. Your barrier systems. How about your blood-brain barrier and tight junction barrier? Your protection against the outside world. Lasering has been shown to help that. I mentioned the anti-aging process. Laser has been shown to help that. So tell me one medication, one nutrition, one anything that checks off and I haven't even listed them all. So it's almost too good to be true when you think about photobiomodulation and non-thermal low-level lasers. So then that comes to your second part of your question, is the difference between a non-thermal laser and a higher power device. Because the misconception in light therapies and low-level laser therapy is some lasers good, more must be better. But when you look at optimal dose response, and this is going to sound Greek to some people, but you don't want to exceed 10 joules per centimeter squared. So you want to be about between 0.5 and 10 joules per centimeter squared for optimal brain parameters. And that's the big thing. It's a Goldilocks effect. So what happens is these higher powered lasers, if you look at the visual spectrum, it goes from, so violet is on the one end of the spectrum and red is on the other end. Like when you think of your rainbow colors, those things in the visible spectrum are kind of safe for the human brain and retina and that kind of stuff. If you go past violet, you have ultraviolet, which is good for antimicrobial stuff, but excess UV can actually be carcinogenic and things like that. But once you get into the true laser realm, now it becomes safe to use. And then you start going the other end of the red. What happens after red is infrared, like near infrared, far infrared. Those, as most people know, are heat devices. And that's the thing. Most of the high-powered lasers don't have clearance as a laser. Most of the high-powered devices only have clearance to come to market as a medical heat lamp. And the next phase up from that is microwave. I am not going to stick somebody's head in a microwave and turn it on, right? I want to do something that's in that perfect Goldilocks sweet, the sweet spot of the therapeutic dose. Now, another big misconception is the difference between LED and true laser. To get optimal laser outcomes, you want to have where all those photons of energy are parallel, coherent, monochromatic, like you want all those photons working together. Whereas LED is just scattered photons going everywhere. It's like taking a red light bulb and shining it near somebody's head. That's just so the audience knows that are newer to this, we actually use LED as our placebo. That's our sham when we do double-blind studies, because people think they're getting laser, but they're actually getting the sham placebo, red light therapy. And so the big thing with the brain is you don't want to cook it. We're not trying to do surgical ablation by doing a high-powered laser. We want to promote mitochondria, we want to promote growth factors, we want to reduce inflammation, whatnot, and that comes from the low dose below 10 joules per centimeter squared. So what happens when you look at all of the literature out there and all of the light devices, it became very apparent to me when I was researching light devices that I was going to use to protect the brains of my patients, myself, my family, and whatnot. Erchonia was perfectly situated. You guys nailed it. You're right in that perfect sweet spot, true laser that's not thermal, it's not going to cook the brain. Like the higher powered lasers can even, there's evidence, and this has been confirmed on multiple studies, high powered lasers can actually create glutamate excitotoxicity. Kind of like drinking a diet soda or punching yourself in the head. Like just because you drink a diet soda, you don't necessarily feel the neurons dying, but they are, that kind of thing. So I don't want to use light devices that are going to get into that thermal load, that are going to get into that ablation, they're going to cause glutamate excitotoxicity. And that's, again, Erchonia nailed it. You guys are the perfect situated device to, number one, do no harm. Our number one job as physicians is do no harm. And so I know with their, like, in the, what you guys have, of the 26 FDA clearances in the United States, Erchonia has 22 of them. They have never, ever in all of their studies had an adverse event reported. Like, that's a pretty good track record when you think of safety, let alone efficacy. So you guys are the most researched and the safest laser on the market.
And that's over a period of time as well. So the research hasn't just happened, in the last 2-3 years. Obviously, it's evolving constantly, but the research has been around for, a number of years. And that's all shown that there's been no adverse side effects whatsoever. And you can't do any harm with the Erchonia lasers.
Yeah, they're pretty infallible and impervious to, like, when you look at the, that's why I have no issues with, like, we do laser rental programs where patients take lasers home and treat themselves. I have no issues with, whether it's a more of a developmental case, like where it's like maybe an autism or ADHD, all the way into, my geriatric population. I can safely have them use this device. Right now I have patients that fly in from around the world to get treated. They get lasered with their Erchonia products 3 different times in the day, and I'm not even close to exceeding that hormetic dose. So yeah, the safety and the track record with these devices is pretty spot on.
So let's say, just to a complete novice who doesn't understand how the Erchonia lasers work, break it down in a way that someone, let's say, who's completely new to this, how do those lasers work when treating the brain?
Well, I think the best analogy that most people can kind of wrap their head around is kind of think of, most people have studied plant photosynthesis, right? Your plants need sunlight to, activate all of the ATP synthesis, the growth factor, all that's humans are the same. We're energy driven beings. Your neurons are using electricity and energy to talk to each other. We get so inundated in a pharmaceutical model, a chemical model, you don't run out of serotonin. You don't run out of it. It's the neurons that are supposed to fire those serotonin, those neurotransmitters. They're not being activated for some reason. And so part of our job is to get that photon energy, just like sunlight, into the cells, so that they can, that can start to boot the system. It's almost like having a hybrid or an electric vehicle. Maybe you got this cool Tesla or something. Well, if you don't have that thing plugged in, that beautiful Tesla isn't going anywhere, kind of thing. So it's like plugging your Tesla in so it has the energy to go do the awesome things that those things can do. So
okay, cool. But what let's say, what happens in the brain when, let's say, you shine the laser that you've currently got, which is the GVL, so that's the green and the violet wavelength. Are we repairing, are we regenerating, or are we just supporting existing cells, or are we doing everything?
all of the above. So, like, for example, some of the hallmark signs, pathophysiological signs of neurodegeneration, or people have heard of amyloid and tau, those bad proteins, the things that gunk up the brain so the neurons kind of shrivel up and die and can't talk to each other and whatnot. There's evidence showing that when you laser the brain, you actually reverse protein misfolds and amyloid. That's what a lot of the drugs are trying to do, is reverse amyloid, those monoclonal antibodies like Aduhelm and stuff. That's only a very small part of it. Lasers can kill off the pathogens that might be negatively affecting your brain. the viruses and bacteria that are getting into the brain. It can actually kill those up. Lasers activate, as I mentioned earlier, all your antioxidant systems. So they're mopping up the free radicals. Lasers are promoting blood flow and new pathways in the brain. Lasers are promoting the energy for the brain and the anti-inflammation in the brain. So it's really every single layer that you need to, there's over 16,000 papers on low-level laser therapy now that are published in literature. So basically every single thing you need to do on the brain can be done with low-level laser at the right dose.
That's amazing. And Erchonia use 3 wavelengths, so green, red, and violet. Are you a big advocate for using all 3 wavelengths on the brain, or are there certain wavelengths that maybe work better than others on the brain?
Yeah, I love that question because it's like a good, better, best. Most of the historic research is based on red, and that's still, red is awesome. But what we're finding is the more energy per photon, the better the laser works even beyond red. And so violet is the most energetic. So when you combine violet with the other colors, like this one's a green violet laser, this is the most energetic laser on the market. So when I'm doing all these complex brain cases that I work with, like Parkinson's and whatnot, I got good results with red. I'm getting even better results with red, green, and violet. So I have 13 different Erchonia devices in my office, the FXs, the handhelds, that kind of stuff. Every single patient that comes in gets brain laser applications of all 3 colors and the gut. So I'm doing a lot of heavy brain gut stuff. Obviously, most people in attendance know that gut is a big, the brain gut axis is very important. So even just doing point and shoot, set it and forget it with the different devices is a very, I don't care what kind of practitioner you are, you can easily accommodate that by just having even your staff put it on. You can preset stuff, put that on. Now, if you want to get a little bit more technical, one example of color affinity is that the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cells, that doesn't even do the mitochondria justice. They're actually like your chip, your information processor of the cells. They're telling cells when it's time to die, kind of thing, and go, the autophagy, mitophagy. They're telling, there's so much more to mitochondria. But what the newer research is showing is that mitochondria have certain rate-limiting enzymes, and I'm not going to bore your audience with Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain and all that stuff. But if you look, the first enzymes of the electron transport chain to make ATP, the fuel that your brain and body needs, is based on NAD and FAD. Well, that has an affinity for violet. The third, and a lot of people are supplementing with NAD right now. Well, violet laser is a way to upregulate that system. Okay, so methylene blue is another one you hear about. That's a complex 1 and 3 type of upregulator. Well, we can use lasers, to overlap that. Number 3 is the CoQ, the ubiquinol complex, and so your green laser affinity. Number 4 is, and that's why people supplement with CoQ10 and PQQ and stuff. Number 4 is red, the cytochrome C oxidase. And so you can actually upregulate all of the rate-limiting enzymes even better with all the different colors and get even better, because obviously the more energy that your neurons have, they're already tacking away at like 98% max metabolic capacity. So if you can give that laser energy to your neurons, now you're giving them that energy and substrate to repair, to function, to fire, to do all the things that the brain needs to do.
That's really, really cool. And how often, let's say, should a typical person be lasering their brain? Like how often and for how long?
Well, I mean, you guys know me. I beat myself up a lot more. I don't, I drive on the Autobahn 200. I eat more bacon than anyone on the planet. So I'm not like, I'm actually trying to die from a bacon and red wine overdose. So, it's like, I want to do stuff to protect my brain. I laser my brain every day. That's my lunchtime break. It's my reset. I meditate, and I meditate under the laser, and I'm just giving my brain that juice and fuel. But there is a cumulative effect of lasers too. That's what the long-term, like when we did the chronic pain study, for example, I was the principal investigator on that. We did, it was 8 treatments over about a 4-week span, but we also did 1-year follow-ups, and the patients still had long-term improvement at the 1 year. So lasers, because they promote neuroplastic like growth factors, they actually have a cumulative long-term effect. So that is another benefit of it. It's not just working only when you're underneath it. It has long-term buildup effects of like things like neuroplasticity and whatnot. So typical treatment strategies, I always give, on these complex brain cases, I always give myself a 12-visit treatment trial just as a proof of concept. I start reversing say the Parkinson's symptoms, the dementia symptoms, or whatever. And then from there, we try and go into, if we're showing that it's working, then we go into a 3-month treatment plan. And then we start the phase down process. And some people, when it's neurodegeneration, they'll probably be getting laser for the rest of their lives, but they don't care. When they get their memory back, or they can move again and do different kind of things, a lot of my patients are buying, literally, I'm having one buy, they're moving to Portugal. I was going to hook them up with you guys. They're buying a laser to take with them because they had such good benefits. So a lot of people are doing that as well too.
Okay, but would you say, like, if you're doing it in your lunchtime, is 5 minutes long enough? Is 10 minutes long enough? Is there, because sometimes with treatments, we'll move on to different modalities that are available currently in the UK for the brain, but typically it requires like a 20-30 minute treatment session. But one of the great things, and I think why I'm able to, luckily laser my brain on a daily basis, is the fact that it's so quick to do. You don't need to have it on the brain for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, or anything like that. It's very quick.
Yeah, to your point, the most I'll typically laser somebody's brain is 10 minutes. But a lot of the stuff I'm doing 5 minutes. And another cool clinical concept is, like, whatever you're doing in your practice, I don't care if it's a musculoskeletal type practice, pain management, whatever, exercise, brain rehab, eye movements, laser at the same time. Like, say I'm doing a balance exercise to restore somebody's balance after, that maybe they're aging or TBI or something. I'll laser the cerebellum while I do the balance exercise. So now they have more substrate, more metabolic capacity and things like that. Maybe you're working on a left knee pain. Well, instead of just maybe I'm doing some movement on the knee or soft tissue or something while I'm lasering the knee. So I always stack. You'll hear me talk about stacking devices all the time. Like, even we do neurofeedback in my office, QEEG stuff and neurofeedback. I'll laser the brain with the neurofeedback mechanisms, and we get even better synergistic results than just neurofeedback by itself. And so you're going to hear about stacking a lot, but like typically 2 minutes to 5 minutes prefrontal is more than enough to upregulate that system and hit the reset button. But maximum 10 minutes is more than enough.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to different modalities that are available to obviously treat the brain. In the UK at the moment, there's been a massive surge in TMS devices being marketed. For anyone who's maybe unfamiliar with TMS devices, what are they and how do they essentially work?
Yeah, that was interesting that when you guys brought that up, because it's like, I know TMS, in the scientific literature and especially in the neuropsych, it has some track record with more of the neuropsychological stuff like depression, a little bit in the OCD arena and things like that. So, it's like, basically, so it's transcranial magnetic stimulation. So they're using super high powered magnets. And when I teach it, TMS, it's almost like a defibrillator for the brain. It's like the brain isn't firing, so it's depressed. Certain pathways aren't firing. So let's go ahead and go, like a defibrillator of the heart. It's like, clear. I'm going to shock the brain, like, wake up, kind of thing. It's like, okay, well that's one way to wake the brain up for in a MDD, like major depressive disorder. Another way to do that is exercise. So it's like, so it's like that. And so when you're doing that, and let's say it's more of a dopamine based, like jolt or shocking the brain to waking up, you got to watch too, because you might drive that patient maybe it's a dopamine manic depressive case. You're going to maybe potentially drive them into manic phase. Or like if there's a seizure risk, you might activate a seizure activity because you're basically jolting or electrifying the brain in a heavy jolt. So instead of like cultivating that garden with all the growth factors and energy and anti-inflammation a laser does, it's basically just force starting the brain. And again, there's some evidence that force starting the brain is a way to jolt it awake out of an MDD and stuff. I'm not dismissing the research behind that, but in a grand scheme of things for what you're trying to do for anti-aging, neurodegeneration, brain optimization, all that stuff, that's not what TMS is for, let alone some of the treatments, the time that's typically associated with that, and the cost. That was another thing that's kind of perplexing to me. I look at the cost of handheld lasers like the Erchonia device compared to these TMS devices, and you can speak to this better than I can, and if you want to touch on it, the cost to the provider, the medical provider, is like, what's the difference on that? What is the actual cost?
it's huge. It's like night and day, literally. And then you've also then got to put that cost onto the patient as well. So the patient are the ones that are going to end up spending more money on something which it's not necessarily going to give them the long-term benefits, because it's not working on a cellular level. And if you're not working on a cellular level, you can't fix things long-term. That's, I think, one of the biggest differences. But in your opinion, what are the biggest differences between non-thermal laser and TMS systems in terms of, let's say, safety, treatment outcomes, the mechanism of action?
Yeah, so obviously safety, there's with a non-thermal class 2 laser, the track record for safety, we've already touched on that. But when you're trying to change brain, you're not just trying to change it temporarily to jolt them out of a depressed state or something. You want to make long-term neuroplastic changes, growth factors, new neurons, things like that. And that's not TMS doesn't. That's not what when you look at the neurophysiological research on that, it's to try and temporarily change the circuitry to fire it up. But you're still got to come in behind that and do all the things you would need to do that got the patient into a depressed state in the first place. Whereas lasers have been shown to actually create long-term neuroplastic growth factors. And I mentioned earlier about like new neurons, new cells, like that kind of stuff. Like that's a cool thing about it. TMS was not necessarily designed for inflammation reduction, obviously. Well, that's a big part of brain health, as we've already alluded to. The energy model, so you look at all the things we've kind of talked on with lasers that those provide that. TMS isn't necessarily designed for that. So, TMS kind of has a lane that it's in, and that's like the neuropsych, like depression and that kind of stuff. And that's, that's fine if that stay in that lane. But to look at long-term and plastic changes and all the cellular level changes and whatnot that you need, lasers will check those boxes for you where TMS can't.
And would it be fair to say that, let's say, the Erchonia lasers can equally treat the likes of anxiety and depression? They're definitely conditions that the Erchonia lasers can treat successfully. And I'm sure you've got plenty of case studies within your own practice that you can quote.
Well, and to that point, it's like, obviously we need more research, and just, there's stuff in the pipeline. I can say that. I can't talk about much right now, but we're always looking at more. We're getting more and more into brain research, brain condition research, things like that. So, but of the evidence that is there, again, of the over 16,000 papers on low-level laser therapy, you will see research showing lasers, again, at the right dose, have been shown to help ameliorate depression, anxiety, some of the addiction, behavioral stuff, things like that. So there is evidence on that. Yeah, absolutely, more research needs to be done. But again, because so much of that stuff, like depression, can be based on the energy failure model and the inflammation model, what better device to to address those two things in low-level lasers? So, and again, you'll see this linearly in my practice with, like, say patients have had post-concussion and they are depressed with brain fog, and I laser them, and they're like, wow, my mood changed, my sleep change, all that stuff. So we see it anecdotally in practice, and you see it in the evidence, in the research that's published. So.
Okay, so if you had, let's say, a patient coming in and they were considering, some form of brain stimulation for mood, memory, or focus, how would you guide them in choosing between, let's say, a TMS system and a non-thermal laser?
Well, I think that question is pretty linear in the answer. It's like, well, number one is the cost to the patient, and you can get an Erchonia device at a much lower cost, both for the consumer and physician facing side of things. Treatment times, long-term results, safety, not worry about side effects. Like, the other thing with TMS is like, I kind of touch on some of the things like the mania or that kind, but you have like loud sounds, clicking sounds. Sometimes you have to use the headset stuff, things like that. You can have scalp pain, scalp burning. So like this, you don't feel at all on, like, it's you don't even, a lot of my patients don't even know that most patients don't know it's on, because it's not thermal, it's not doing anything like that. Here, I'll do something, this always freaks people out. What should you never do with a laser?
Put it in the eyes. Yeah, exactly.
That drives people crazy, because they're like, what? You can't be late. I'm not telling people just go stare at, but that's how safe these devices are. Okay. Yeah. I actually do retinal repair stuff, and this is a whole side topic, but that's how safe they are. So, like, to me, it's really, do you want not just short-term benefits, but long-term benefits? Do you want safety? Do you want less expense? You know, so when you, again, a lot of the tangible things, the lasers are a superior product and idea for a lot of these things, not just in the depression arena. Because again, I'm not knocking TMS for things like depression. It has a good track record with that, but compared to what it's doing both short and long term, it's an apples to oranges comparison to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's one of the best things about the Erchonia devices is the amount of positive side effects, we always call it, positive add-ons, you know, that you're not necessarily, it's not the real reason or the real purpose why you came in for a treatment or you came in to see the practitioner, but you're going to gain so many additional benefits from having the laser therapy.
Right. And that's, you know, you bring up such a good point because, you know, a lot of my practice, I'm not an MD, right? So a lot of my practice though is like my whole day yesterday was Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, things like that. I'm not saying I'm treating or curing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, but these patients are going, well, I can put my t-shirt on now and my tremor's gone.
Wow.
Did I cure their? No, I'm like, I didn't cure. The only thing I cure is a ham. But I helped normal adaptive physiology, and lo and behold, you know, whatever they're suffering from, sleep problems, headaches, pain, brain fog, whatever, and that goes away. That's a beautiful side effect of the laser, isn't it? So
yeah. But how long will that last typically? Like how much longevity will they get out of that before, let's say, they may get another tremor or they may, you know, start to decline?
well, you know, a lot of that depends on what are the underlying comorbidities that triggered in the first place. Like if they're a long COVID and they have heavy metals and they eat donuts every day and they don't work out, and you know, I can get people feeling better and functioning better and whatnot. But if I don't address all the other underlying mechanisms, now you know, they may regress back into XYZ. So a lot of that depends on what were the major underpinnings that was causing in the first place. And this is why I like that integrative practitioner perspective. Like, why I do functional med, detox, chelation, oxygen therapies, laser, functional, you know. So you want it, the more ways you can come at the brain, the better, and the better long-term results are going to get as well. So
how important do you think things like supplementation and the right nutrition are for brain health? Are they like crucial?
well, you know, you'd like to think even eating a healthy diet is going to be enough, right? And you don't want to supplement your way out of a bad diet. If they're still eating pizza every day, like, I'm sorry, there's no supplement in the world that's going to overcome the donut and pizza and the Western diet stuff. However, even in good diets, we're seeing the micronutrient depletion in our soil sources, like our magnesium levels, zinc levels, everything's coming down because of our farming techniques and our pesticide leaching and toxicity that we're facing. And wild caught, if you eat one river caught fish in the United States, you're probably having the equivalent of the plastics of drinking tap water for about a month. So there's so many environmental pollutants and toxins right now that it's even like you almost have to be way off the grid to not be exposed to this stuff and get good soil and food sources. So I am of the belief that we are having to supplement a lot more to help offset some of those micronutrient deficits and depletions. And that's another reason why I love the laser applications, because no matter what, we're getting beat up by our environment. So again, what else are we doing to tamp out that fire and those deficits? That's another rationale for doing regular laser to the brain and body.
And if so, it's even more important now to do the laser therapy now, because like you said, the quality of food isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So there's even more reason why we should be lasering ourselves daily.
Yeah, and like what's a scary stat is when you look at the epidemiology of things like Alzheimer's, like dementia, the countries that have the highest rates, number one is North America, the regions, one is North America, two is Western Europe. So it's like a lot of that has to do, they talk about it like Alzheimer's is like a disease of Western civilization. And why is that? Well, we eat a lot of like these ultra processed foods, the amount of carbs we have. We just want to, this is where the whole, you know, like paleo, hunter gatherer, carnivore, like eat what Mother Nature gave us. That's what we want to eat. Good grass-fed, you know, finished meat sources, you know, natural chicken, you know, the non-GMO stuff, the non-genetically engineered stuff, you like all the stuff that you can have in your pantry that can stay there for 5 years without going bad. That's not good for a peer, right? So, yeah, so it's like that's where the diet, if you're getting good wild caught fish that's not full of mercury and cadmium, so again, it's so hard to find all that stuff. So how are we offsetting some of the damaging effects? Well, that comes back to putting out the inflammation and et cetera, et cetera.
And making our cells as healthy as they possibly can be. That's crucial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And so if that's why it comes down to a couple of simple things. If you can exercise and move and laser your brain and body, and then do a few basic supplements and keep the brain stimulated by like always learning, always activating with, stay socially engaged, learn a language, I play guitar, I suck, but I'm always trying to learn it, that I'm always keeping my brain engaged, so that if you don't use it, you lose it. So when you laser and activate, those are two of the most fundamental things you can do for brain health.
Amazing. So you touched briefly on a couple of, I would say, success stories just after, a couple of treatments with your patients that you see. Is there a specific patient story that really stands out to you? Someone whose life completely changed after incorporating brain health into their treatment plan?
Well, it's like, let me just use this week. So this week I have Dr. Mark Sue, who's one of the top integrative medical doctors in the United States. He sent a spinal cord injury patient to me. She had a burst fracture at T12. So Dr. Sue flew in from the Northeast. He's up in the Massachusetts area, and he flew in with the patient to shadow me. And he made a Facebook post yesterday. He's like, I can't believe what I just saw. This is his first time seeing me in practice. He saw me take a Parkinson's patient that was completely like bradykinesia, mass face, not talking, not opening the eyes, really severe Parkinson's case, start walking, talking and whatnot, just by upregulating the frontal lobe, upregulating the mesencephalon, doing things like that. Literally just start to give the brain that energy and whatnot to start to work again. He saw another case. He was like, "What did you just do?" This patient had a brain bleed. It was a malpractice surgical brain bleed situation that basically caused a stroke on this patient, and it was affecting like the hemiplegic gait, like the right side of the body, very similar to a stroke, hemiplegia, but also was affecting speech. So the patient was tongue-tied and would just do back of the throat guttural sounds like talking like that. I started to laser Broca's speech area, the vagus glossopharyngeal area, and the cerebellum, and then I had the patient go supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And Dr. Sue was like, "What did you just do?" Like, you literally, I said, I literally just upregulated those areas of the brain that needed to fire those pathways with the laser. And the patient's pathways were starting to be able to turn on and activate. And then so I'll take that energy that and the upregulation, and then I just keep going with my therapies, tongue therapies, all the speech therapy stuff, all the movement therapy stuff and things like that. So he made this Facebook post just so he's like, "This was unbelievable. We need to get more doctors doing this worldwide." And that's what he talked to me about, is how do we scale this, having more doctors lasering the brain and doing this integrative neurology approach.
But it comes down to education at the end of the day. That's fundamentally where it has to start, and it has to continue with the education, because without that, people will never be able to acquire the knowledge of how to treat different conditions, or even what this type of technology can do to the human body. So we need to continue educating.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'll give Erchonia the utmost credit. You guys do an amazing job of the patient education, doctor education, weekend seminars, webinars. Like, I've got the one coming up that some of your attendants might be interested in, because I'm actually lecturing in Portland, Maine, but we're streaming it worldwide. And so I know the time zone becomes a bit of an issue, but you guys have had me come over there and speak. Like, you guys do a better job of educating people on lasers and integrative neurology than anyone. There's nobody that comes close to that. And so Erchonia you guys have lots of webinars and informational things. So I always recommend that people start with that, like just the basic webinars on like, how do I turn the laser on and program it, and basic protocols. And in my seminar is more intense, obviously, it's more advanced, but it's something that is a very needed and underserved area. Again, when you look at worldwide, there's going to be over 150 million just Alzheimer's patients alone by 2050. Like, we need more doctors doing this brain application approach. But I always come back to people in attendance, do this stuff to protect your own brain. One of the sayings in the laser industry is you buy a laser for your own brain, your patients just get to be the benefactor of it. So make that investment for your own brain, and then just take it to practice on Monday morning.
Definitely. I mean, we always say prevention is much better than cure anyways. So laser your brain, because it will certainly improve your mood, sleep levels, energy levels, all of these things, so that later on in life, you're at less risk for having, you know, the likes or developing the likes of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc., because you've kept themselves healthy for as long as possible.
Exactly. And you brought, actually, that touches on another really good point, Vanessa, is that, I work with a lot of pro athletes, Olympians, things like UFC fighters. I'm doing a lot of the laser stuff for optimization, like CEOs of companies and whatnot. They're trying to do all the biohacking and improvement, reaction times and motor function, and let alone injury recovery and stuff. So I'm doing a lot of laser stuff for optimization, not just trying to get a stage 5 Alzheimer's to reverse course kind of thing. So I love what you said, is that it's much easier to help do stuff preventatively now before some. Don't wait. I'm seeing the average onset of cognitive decline and dementia in my practice at 52 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is scary. And like I said, if you hit 75, it's over 50% chance. So if you're like, start lasering your brain now. And I do it on kids, that kind of stuff as well too. That's how safe these devices are. You can do them on newborns, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I love what you said there. Do prevention now, give your brain a good environment now, and it's less likely to succumb to neurodegeneration.
Well, as well, we all know that, stats are showing that we are living a lot longer. We're living, into 80s, 90s, and, there's research to show that we'll be living past 100 very, very soon, more typically. So you don't want to be getting to your 60s or 70s and having to spend 20, 30 years in extreme pain, extreme discomfort. You want to be able to enjoy those additional years of life. And the best way to do that is start as young as possible. But, it comes down to patient education, patients understanding that they need access to this. When they understand they need access to it, they'll contact you as the practitioner to ask you the questions. So it all works in tandem with each other.
Absolutely. And another big take home, like, you guys have a ton of research, and I've been a part of some of these double-blind randomized studies. Pain management alone, like, you just look at that side of the equation and how well these, all doctors I know are looking for safer, healthier alternatives. Did you see that gabapentin study about over two times a little more likely to become demented if you're taking gabapentin? And they're using that off-label for pain management, right? And small fiber disease and things. Oxycontin, that's a disaster right now. We need safer alternative pain management things. And so if you're out of pain and not inflamed, you're more likely to move. But it's the same way. A healthy brain equals less pain. Less pain equals a healthy brain. And one of the things you'll see me do, of the pain management cases I take on, a lot of times I say it's low back or something. I'm treating the brain with lasers and doing all the cognitive behavioral stuff and things like that. I don't even have to touch their low back sometimes. They're like, my low back pain's gone. Yeah, because everything has a central consequence and central mechanism, especially chronic pain. It's no longer L5 disc or whatever. After a couple of weeks, it starts to centralize. And if you're not treating brain, that's one of the reasons why people aren't getting out of chronic pain, is we're not doing enough stuff like this to those central mechanisms to gate pain and reorganize those things like the default mode network and whatnot. So it all comes back to brain. That's the one of the main take-home points, is that the more you can do to cultivate a healthy brain environment, that beautiful garden that's in your head, the more likely you are to have a healthy body, a healthy existence, out there playing tennis, traveling, doing stuff that we all want to do. Like you said, if we can do it till we're 100 or beyond, that's great. And that's why lasers are such a critical part that everyone should be considering. So
that's perfect. So for everyday people that are listening, what signs should they look for that their brain health may need some attention?
Don't wait for any signs. Start now prophylactically, because if you're starting to have cognitive decline like memory loss and whatnot, it's starting to get into that no-fly zone. I get some of it's the normal aging process and whatnot, but I would rather not wait for symptoms to start, because if it is, that means things have gone so far south down that rabbit hole that you want to, obviously, the more you can do this stuff prophylactically. It's like that paradigm of healthcare. Again, a lot of the Western paradigm is like, we're healthy when we're symptom free. No, we're not. There's that whole other second half of the paradigm of optimization and anti-aging and longevity and stuff that you want to tap into with a healthy diet and lifestyle, and laser should be a part of that. So I would say, don't wait for symptoms. Start doing this stuff now.
That's perfect. So if you could give one piece of advice to someone who wants to protect their brain and age well, what would it be? Get the laser on there. you laser, I'll answer the question.
That's like I can't get any more linear than that and more simple than that. If you got a safe non-thermal laser that's a true laser, that's why the Erchonia product is perfect, both for the advanced practitioners doing advanced brain stuff to the general public that's just looking for a safe alternative to protect the brain. That's a one-stop shop. Move, exercise, and laser your brain, and now you've got the perfect 1-2 punch to protect yourself.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Well, that sort of wraps up our nice little Q&A this evening, and it would be amazing to get you over at some point within the next, 6 to 12 months to come over to Europe and, do a full 2-day seminar, because I'm sure we can go into so much more detail than just 1 hour. This is kind of like just a brief understanding of everything. If anyone has any questions, please put them into the question box, and we've got a little bit of time to run through a couple of them. So now's your time. If there's any questions that you want to ask Dr. Trevor, please put them into the question section, and we will run through them. One question: what was number 3 in the top things to achieve optimal brain function? So you've just said 2 of them. What was the 3rd thing?
You have to come to my seminar and find out. No, I'm kidding. No, it's hyperbaric oxygen. HBOT was number 3. And what's interesting about that, again, going back to the whole stacking modalities, one of the things we'll do is say I need to target a tissue. And this kind of ties into the, a lot of people are into like stem cells, exosomes, peptides, things like that. If I'm trying to target a tissue, say I've had a stroke in my left temporal lobe or something, if I'm using stem cells like intrathecal stem cells and I laser this area, guess what it does? It draws the stem cells like a beacon of light to that target tissue, and it helps promote the differentiation of the autologous stem cell into whatever the target tissue is, like neuroglial. Say you're doing a knee and you want cartilage. So we stack lasers with regenerative medicine, but it's same thing with hyperbaric oxygen. I love hyperbaric oxygen because it hyperperfuses the oxygen. It doesn't need the red blood cells. You can be anemic, for example, and it doesn't matter. Normally you need the red blood cells to carry the oxygen to the different parts of the body. Hyperbaric overcomes that and creates a perfusion of plasma. Well, what we do is when we need the oxygen to target a certain area, we'll just put the laser on that area. Like that spinal cord injury case that I'm working at, T12 area, I laser that area. She goes into the hyperbaric, and so it helps create local gradients as well as the systemic perfusion. And then we laser again after to help the rebound effect of the diffusion gradients and all that whole ATP synthesis thing that you need oxygen for. So that's a neat way to stack things like oxygen therapies with laser.
That's amazing. Got another question here. You know how we mentioned using the 3 Erchonia wavelengths, red, green, and violet. Can using all 3 wavelengths confuse or cancel the frequency settings?
No, not the. So there's a difference between the nanometers of the color that makes it that color. So the violet's 405, that's a shorter, faster wavelength. Green's 520, and then red's 635 kind of thing. So there's a difference between that and pulsing the light, and that's some of the frequency specific stuff. So like 2 of the most important frequencies for the brain are 40 hertz and 10 hertz. So all of my devices have a 1040 setting. And I call it, the optimized brain setting. So if your audience is like, well, I just want to remember one frequency specific thing, that would be at 10 and 40 hertz. And I don't know if I'll have time, but you can look at the literature. And by the way, because there's some of the detractors will say, I get that an EEG frequency is different than a photonic frequency, but there is entrainment overlap in studies. So to say that in English, like I can pulse my lasers at certain frequencies and have similar physiological effects as like visual evoked potential pulsing, QEEG pulsing, neurofeedback pulsing, and things like that. So there is some crossover of those arenas, but the brain works at different frequencies. Sometimes it needs to slow down for like sleep. So it goes into like theta and delta. That peak idling frequency, that peak alpha, that your brain is like Ferrari engine that just is like humming away, getting ready to gas brake and do all the things, it's 10 hertz. So that's one of the reasons why we love a 10 hertz frequency. The parasympathetic resting digesting system likes a 10 hertz frequency. So you can tap into that and program that into your lasers. But so there's a difference between the wavelength and the frequencies that you're actually programming into the pulsing.
Okay, and when you're pulsing the lasers, and let's say you're stacking the lasers, so maybe you're using two at the same time, if both lasers were all on 1040, 1040, what benefit will that have? And is that okay to do?
Oh yeah. So it's like, if I'm trying to promote certain bandwidth activity, I mean, a lot of the benefits of lasers are built in or baked into the Erchonia device that aren't variables. The wavelength of the color of it and the dose, which is a low dose like we've been hammering on, that's built in. You don't alter that. You can alter the time, obviously, so that can up the dose response. But again, just to illustrate the safety of an Erchonia product, you could leave this, not that you would ever need to, but I could leave this on somebody's head for hours and not exceed hormetic dose response. You wouldn't need that. Like I said, usually 10 minutes max is all you need for therapeutic time. So, those things are baked in. The frequency specific stuff is kind of a cherry on top, because we know, like in EEG studies, for example, if I'm like OCD, for example, and I'm stuck on high beta and I can't inhibit like my right prefrontal cortex, I can put a 10 hertz frequency of the right prefrontal area to help those GABA inhibitory things, to help to calm the brain down and not worry as much and not perseverate as much and that kind of thing. So a lot of the brain inhibition comes through activation. That's kind of a weird concept, but if you think about your prefrontal system, that's that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That's the system that's saying, you know what? Don't get naked and put a lampshade at the party, because it's like, that seems like a good idea to jump off this cliff. No, it's the prefrontal cortex that says don't do that. That's a bad idea. So I can get that inhibition through activating areas like the vagus nerve, SCM, like the prefrontal system, things like that. But then you can get frequency specific to say, I know I want to slow the brain down from being stuck in that high beta. Maybe I'm doing like a 110, what I call a rest digest setting, or something like that. So yeah, you can get, those are more nuanced things on more specific brain things, but that's how cool how you can get that those more fine details to really up your clinical game. But just getting this on the prefrontal area, there's a good chance that's going to help with a lot of the symptoms they're suffering from, just as one example.
Okay, so if let's say you had one laser and it was set at 1111, for example, and then the other laser was set at 1111, and you use them together, would that add up to like 2222?
No. So it's still the 1 hertz frequency is still going to integrate in a transference of a 1 hertz net effect. So no, it doesn't. It's not like the 1 + 1 = 2 kind of thing. Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, that's enough time for questions, or we're going to run out of time. If anyone has any further questions, please, when this gets uploaded to YouTube, you can add them into the comments section and we'll reply that way, so everyone can have access to that. And thank you so much for everyone who's joined. I think if everyone has a GVL or an EVRL, you'll definitely be looking at your settings and making sure that you laser the brain. That is the key takeaway from this, because it has so many long-term health impacts in a positive manner on the human body. So thank you all for joining, and thank you so much to Dr. Trevor Berry for your time and for sharing your expertise. And I'm sure we'll be sharing more and more knowledge with the European audience very soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you everyone in attendance and the watches this. Vanessa, always good seeing you, and I look forward to getting over to the other side of the pond soon. So
brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks. Bye.